Paul McCartney spent years keeping his real thoughts about one woman a secret. She entered the Beatles' recording sessions in 1968 and tore everything apart. She played on their equipment without asking. She violated their special guy thing rule. The rest of the Beatles despised her presence as well. Paul felt replaced, as his close friend preferred her over the band. In 2023, he eventually revealed the awkward reality. She didn't only end the Beatles. She ended Paul's heart in a way people had no idea. Paul McCartney was born on June 18, 1942, during the middle of World War II. Liverpool was bombed relentlessly by German planes, and families like his got to hide in underground shelters almost every night. His father, Jim, was employed in cotton sales, and his mother, Mary, was a nurse at Walton Hospital, the same hospital where Paul had been born. The family lived perilously near the docks, which were constantly under siege. When Paul was born, his father made a joke, saying he looked awful, like a piece of red meat with one open eye, crying incessantly. That tough start in the midst of bombs and blackouts influenced the way that Paul would view the world. At the age of only 5, Paul had already acquired the ability to fight. He recalled punching a boy with a metal bar and being reprimanded in front of the entire school. He was to find that the hardness was useful afterwards, particularly after passing the 11+ examination, which secured him a place at the Liverpool Institute. But his success did not make life any simpler because his mother was Catholic and his father was Protestant. He was targeted. The other boys, who came from Protestant backgrounds, bullied him brutally. School every day was like a fight, and Paul learned how to defend himself. These early days of struggle remained with him and would eventually manifest in songs that spoke of survival and being strong. Paul's most difficult experience was in 1956. His mother passed away on October 31st due to breast cancer. She was 47. Paul was 14 and didn't believe it. She had hidden the illness, and she died after surgery due to a blood clot. Paul's initial thought was heartbreaking. He inquired as to how they would manage without her money. Mary was the primary breadwinner. His final memory of her was ribbing her for the way she pronounced the word ask. That sense of guilt never dissipated. A few months later, he penned his first song, I Lost My Little Girl, as a means of coming to terms with his loss. That loss would remain deeply entrenched in him. And years afterward, when he dreamed that she said to him everything would be all right, it came to inspire one of his greatest songs, Let It Be. Paul's father, Jim, was a salesman above and beyond. He was a gifted musician who played piano and trumpet. He had been employed at the Hippodrome Theater in Liverpool and picked up music by simply listening every night when operating the spotlights. In 1957, Jim presented Paul with a trumpet, expecting he'd be his successor. But Paul immediately understood he couldn't sing and play the trumpet simultaneously. So he exchanged it for a guitar that was worth $15. That very decision totally altered music history. The guitar provided Paul with a means to sing and write songs simultaneously. His father's preference for old music greatly affected Paul's style, particularly his liking for powerful melodies and ear-catching melodies. Despite school and music, Paul had to work as well. At 16 years old in 1958, he worked at grueling jobs just to support the family. He delivered coal on frigid mornings and cleaned floors at a cotton mill, where the machinery was so deafening that you could not hear yourself think. His granddad had spent his life cutting tobacco in Copp's warehouse, and his dad had labored in Liverpool's cotton exchange. These experiences introduced Paul to working people, their humor, pain, and pride. It was this world that gave shape to most of the Beatles songs that celebrated ordinary life. Something horrific occurred when Paul was 10 years old in 1952. He nearly drowned when he went swimming with pals in one of Liverpool's flooded quarries. The deep holes were inviting fun, but fatal, full of ice-cold water and abandoned mining gear. They were death traps for children. Paul fell in, and his friends had to rescue him. A lot of kids had perished in those waters. That fright left him with a fear of swimming that lasted for life, and perhaps even a more heightened awareness of how easily life could be snuffed out. Then came the day that turned everything around. July 6, 1957, Paul attended a church fete at St. Peter's in Wilton. It was hot and sunny. He saw a boy called John Lennon play guitar with unusual chords he'd picked up from his mother. Paul, being left-handed, turned John's guitar over and played 20 Flight Rock flawlessly, belting out every lyric. He also sang Long Tall Sally like a pro. The group couldn't believe it. He could sing, play, tune guitars, and knew the hits. That was the start of a partnership that would shake the world. A fortnight later, Pete Shotton spotted Paul on his bike and casually asked him to come out and play with John's band, the Quarrymen. Paul agreed to do so after scout camp and a family vacation in Philly. His first actual gig with the band was on October 18, 1957. Everyone had matching jackets on. They cashed out slowly, little by little. What made it even more poignant was that John's mother, Julia, had passed away only 3 months before. Paul knew that hurt. He had lost his own mother the previous year. That common tragedy bound them together, and their music would express the feelings they couldn't verbalize. By 1959, John and Paul were playing truant in order to write songs in Paul's bedroom at 20 Fourth Land Road. They sat with their faces together writing and jotted down ideas on a budget tape recorder. Their first song together was Too Bad About Soros. Next came Just Fun and an instrumental titled Looking Glass. They approached songwriting as a job, creating a notebook containing more than 100 songs well before they were well known. This was the seed of what would become their later success. But all wasn't smooth sailing. At that same first Quarrymen gig in October 1957, Paul had only one task to do: play a solo on Guitar Boogie. He had rehearsed it time and time again, but when the time arrived, the nerves overpowered him. He froze, got through the tune awkwardly, and was thoroughly humiliated. He came close to abandoning music forever. But rather than quitting, he realized that he wasn't meant to be a lead guitarist. That failure prompted him to see that they needed someone improved, and so George Harrison was recruited in early 1958. That move would forever mold the band. In May 1960, Paul adopted a stage name while on a tour in Scotland that was crazy. For 8 days, the band toured behind singer Johnny Gentle. Paul referred to himself as Paul Ramone, attempting to be posh. They drove around in a small van, slept in seedy accommodations, and didn't even appear on the flyers. The tour was a disaster, but Paul recalled Scottish women inquiring whether it was his actual name. In spite of the disaster, it provided him with an experience of the road lifestyle. Hamburg followed. On the 17th of August, 1960, the Beatles started performing at Germany's red light district in the Indra Club. They played for hours daily, for 0.5 hours during weekdays and 6 hours on Saturdays. The environment was dotted with strip clubs and rowdy crowds. They received only a few marks per performance, which was hardly enough to eat. But this drudgery made them stronger. Club proprietors would yell at them to perform, and they did. John would go crazy on stage, and they began to form a genuine performance style. Hamburg is where they really established themselves as a band, George later said. Paul made a big choice in Hamburg. When Stuart Sutcliffe departed the band in 1961, they required a new bassist. Paul did not want the position, but he grabbed it nonetheless. He purchased a Hufner violin bass from a neighborhood music store. That bass became legendary. He played it on the group's early releases and singles, such as She Loves You. His melodic bass playing revolutionized the way people perceived the bass guitar. It was no longer background music. It was part of the song's soul. Everything changed when they hired Brian Epstein. On November 9, 1961, he noticed them playing at the Cavern Club and thought straight away that they were special. Within a few weeks, on December 3rd, he suggested that he would manage them. He was inexperienced, but they admired his manner and confidence. Their parents also approved of him, and before long, he was leading the group towards something enormous. The greatest scandal struck in August 1962. John invited Ringo Starr to the band. Within 2 days, Pete Best was gone. Fans were enraged. Some picketed outside Pete's home, and George even got punched by an outraged fan. At Ringo's first session, the producer didn't have confidence in him and hired a session drummer. Ringo feared that he might also be sacked. But eventually, this new lineup gelled and everything changed. Their first single, Love Me Do, was released on October 5, 1962. It did not become a number one right off the bat, but it reached number 17 in November in the UK. Paul provided harmony and played bass, and John played the harmonica. They recorded 3 takes using different drummers. When the song first arrived in the US in 1964, it reached number 1. That was their 4th US number 1 single that year, making history and catapulting them to worldwide popularity. It all started on February 9th, 1964, when 4 lads from Liverpool took the stage on The Ed Sullivan Show and altered history. That evening, 73 million viewers were stuck on their TVs, establishing a record that would last 3 years. CBS received 50,000 requests for tickets, despite the theater seating a maximum of 728 spectators. The event became more legendary than Elvis's first appearance in 1957, which received only 7,000 requests. At one point, when the camera swept across band members, John's caption read sarcastically, "Sorry girls, he's married." Terry McDermott, an Olympic skater, pretended to cut off Paul's hair backstage, and everyone erupted into laughter. It started with "All My Loving." Then Paul sang "Until There Was You," and after that "She Loves You," and came back later to sing "I Saw Her Standing There, and I Want to Hold Your Hand." It all happened just 77 days after President Kennedy was killed, and somehow this joyful noise helped America start to smile again. Then came March 1964, and something even more unbelievable happened. On the 16th, "Can't Buy Me Love" was released and immediately exploded. It had already racked up 1.7 million advanced orders in America and over 2.1 million around the world. In one day, over 1 million copies were sold. On April 4th, the record leaped from number 27 to number 1 within 1 week, the largest leap at that time in Billboard history. The Beatles occupied all 5 top positions on the list the same day. "Twist and Shout" was at number 2. And then "She Loves You," "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and "Please Please Me." The next week, they had 14 on the Hot 100. That type of control wasn't surpassed until 2022. But all was not happiness. July 4th, 1966, while a visit to Manila went sour. The Beatles had unwittingly missed a palace function at which First Lady Imelda Marcos was the hostess, and this sparked a violent outburst. They never signed on to go, but when they didn't arrive, the press distorted the news. On the way to the airport, furious citizens stood along the streets. Uniformed men beat them and their entourage. The airport administrator even cut off escalators and boasted of assaulting their manager and punching Ringo and John. Even local ticket holders were assaulted for attempting to defend them. Paul went on to say they shared a kiss with their airplane seats once they were at last safe. That horrific day made them realize the touring lifestyle may not be worth it anymore. Then on November 19th, 1966, flying home from safari in Kenya, Paul came up with an idea that would forever change music. Seated beside his girlfriend Jane Asher and road manager Mal Evans, he conjured up an imaginary band that would allow them to escape being the Beatles. He was sick of the mop-top look and wanted something else. His concept turned into Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. John afterwards minimized it, describing it as merely Paul following fashion, and George never really liked the idea. Nevertheless, the project continued to redefine what albums could do. However, the magic didn't always hit. On December 26, 1967, their television film Magical Mystery Tour was broadcast in black and white on the BBC. Filmed primarily on an old airfield in Kent, it followed barely a few months after manager Brian Epstein's untimely death. The critics were waiting for an excuse, and they had one. The sound was weak, the colors were absent, and the story lacked order. It was their first large flop. A color version was seen in January 1968, but did not do much good. Ironically, the movie later became known as a daring work of experimental film, and the soundtrack continued to sell. During this same time, a strange rumor began to circulate. Paul experienced a genuine moped accident in London in 1966. For some reason, this minor incident set off the "Paul is dead" rumor. Fans speculated he'd been killed in a car accident on November 9, 1966, and had been replaced with a look-alike by a secret group. Hints were allegedly embedded in songs and album artwork. By 1969, the rumor was spreading on American college campuses and newspapers. It finally came to an end in November 1969 when Life magazine ran photos of Paul alive and grinning. That year, too, things were dissolving behind the scenes. Tensions ran high in the White Album sessions in 1968. P.